Hello and welcome to the Henry George Daily Devotional, episode 12. We have Justin and Scrubbles in the chat. Both are saying my live stream title is incorrect. They'll have to suffer because the recording has started. We are continuing with the meaning of the terms. George is still holding out on us. Well, he's told us, he's defined a few. He defined land for us so far, and labor maybe or something. And now he's trying to show how these people, their definition of capital, it's not consistent between them, and what the ramifications of these slight inconsistencies are. And he's really gonna hopefully tell us the true answer of what capital is very, very soon. Tax the shoes. Will Adidas sponsor Flacco? Don't get me started on IP rights and brand names. This was a gift from my sister. This is a problem with having chat. You guys, this is a problem with having chat, man. They distract from the true the value from Georgism. All right, here we go. Ricardo's definition avoids. Should we review Ricardo's definition? No, we're just going on. Ricardo's definition avoids including as capital things which might be but are not employed in production, by covering only such as are employed. But it is open to the first objection made to McCulloch's. If only wealth that may be or that is destined to be, used in supporting producers or assisting production is capital, then the stocks of jewelers, toy dealers, tobacconists, confectioners, picture dealers, etc., in fact, all stocks that consist of and all stocks insofar as they consist of articles of luxury, are not capital. Right, because these are things that are luxury items. They are not used to produce more items. So we continue. If Mill, by remitting the distinction to the mind of the capitalist, avoids this difficulty, which does not seem to me clear, Henry George writes, it is by making the distinction so vague that no power short of omniscience could tell in any given country at any given time what was and what was not capital. But the great defect which these definitions have in common is that they include what clearly cannot be accounted capital if any distinction is to be made between laborer and capitalist. For they bring into the category of capital the food, clothing, etc., in the possession of the day laborer, which he will consume whether he works or not, as well as the stock in the hands of the capitalist with which he proposes to pay the laborer for his work. Yet manifestly this is not the sense in which the term capital is used by these writers when they speak of labor and capital as taking separate parts in the work of production and separate shares in the distribution of its proceeds. When they speak of wages as drawn from capital, or as depending upon the ratio between labor and capital, or in any of the ways in which the term is generally used by them, in all these cases, the term capital is used in its commonly understood sense as that portion of wealth which its owners do not propose to use directly for their own gratification, but for the purposes of obtaining more wealth. In short, by political economists, in everything except their definitions and first principles, as well as by the world at large, quote, that part of a man's stock, unquote, to use the words of Adam Smith, quote, which he expects to afford him revenue, is called his capital, unquote. This is the only sense in which the term capital expresses any fixed idea, the only sense in which we can with any clearness separate it from wealth and contrast it with labor. For if we must consider as capital everything which supplies the laborer with food, clothing, shelter, etc., then to find a laborer who is not a capitalist, we shall be forced to hunt up an absolutely naked man, destitute even of a sharpened stick or of a burrow in the ground, a situation in which, save as the result of exceptional circumstances, human beings have never yet been found. I mean, if that's the length that these other economists are willing to go to, maybe it still works. But all right, I really like this definition of capital. It does seem very clear to me. Capital is the stuff that a person has that he's going to use to make more wealth. Yeah. All right, we continue. It seems to me that the variance and inexactitude in these definitions arise from the fact that the idea of what capital is has been deduced from a preconceived idea of how capital assists production. Instead of determining what capital is and then observing what capital does, the functions of capital have first been assumed, and then a definition of capital made which includes all things which do or may perform those functions. Let us reverse this process, and adopting the natural order, ascertain what the thing is before settling on what it does. All we are trying to do, all that is necessary to do, is to fix, as it were, the metes and bounds of a term that in the main is well apprehended, to make definite, that is, sharp and clear on its verges, a common idea. If the articles of actual wealth existing at a given time in a given community were presented in situ to a dozen intelligent men who had never read a line of political economy, it is doubtful they would differ in respect to a single item as to whether it should be accounted capital or not. In situ means just means in the original place, situated in the original place. Money, which its owner holds for use in his business or in speculation, would be accounted capital. Money set aside for household or personal expenses would not. That part of a farmer's crop held for sale or for seed or to feed his help in part payment of wages would be accounted capital. That held for the use of his own family would not be. The horses and carriage of a hackman would be classified as capital, but an equipage kept for the pleasure of its owner would not be capital. So no one would think of counting as capital the false hair on the head of a woman, the cigar in the mouth of a smoker, or the toy with which a child is playing. But the stock of a hair dealer, of a tobacconist, or the keeper of a toy store would be unhesitatingly set down as capital. Yes, I'm just going to say that again. The false hair on the head of a woman, not capital. The false hair in the stock of a hair dealer, it is capital. The same thing can be capital or not capital depending on the owner's intended use. A cigar in the mouth of a smoker, not capital. A cigar in the shop of a tobacconist, yes, capital. A toy in the hand of a child, no capital. A toy in the toy store, yes, capital. A coat which a tailor had made for sale would be accounted capital, but not the coat he had made for himself. Food in the possession of a hotel keeper or a restaurateur would be accounted capital, but not the food in the pantry of a housewife, or in the lunch basket of a workman. Pig iron in the hands of the smelter or founder or dealer would be accounted capital, but not the pig iron used as ballast in the hold of a yacht. The bellows of a blacksmith, the looms of a factory, would be capital, but not the sewing machine of a woman who does only her own work. A building let for hire or used for business or productive purposes, but not a homestead. In short, I think we should find that now, as when Dr. Adam Smith wrote, that part of a man's stock which he expects to yield him a revenue is called his capital, and, omitting his unfortunate slip as to personal qualities and qualifying somewhat his enumeration of money, it is doubtful we could better list the different articles of capital than did Adam Smith in the passage which in the previous part of this chapter I have condensed. Oh, so he got all those ideas, those examples from Dr. Adam Smith, I see. Okay, we have 5 more seconds. I want to read this paragraph. Now, if after having thus separated the wealth that is capital from the wealth that is not capital, we look for the distinction between the two classes, we shall not find it to be as to the character, capabilities, or final destination of the things themselves, as has been vainly attempted to draw it, but it seems to me that we shall find it to be as to whether they are or are not in the possession of the consumer. Footnote. Money may be said to be in the hands of the consumer when devoted to the procurement of gratification, as though not in itself devoted to consumption. It represents wealth which is, and thus what in the previous paragraph I have given as the common classification would be covered by this distinction, and would be substantially correct. In speaking of money in this connection, I am of course speaking of coin, for although paper money may perform all the functions of coin, it is not wealth, and therefore wealth and cannot therefore be capital. There is a bit of confusion about money stuff. George writes another book or two which I have not yet read. I've listened to some talks about them, and I don't think it's super necessary to have a really firm opinion about monetary policy to really appreciate what George is really getting at here in Progress and Poverty about land monopoly. I do think understanding monetary policy is important. Anyway, we're going long today. I'm continuing. Such articles of wealth as in themselves, in their uses, or in their products, are yet to be exchanged are capital. Such articles of wealth as are in the hands of the consumer are not capital. Hence, if we define capital as wealth in course of exchange, understanding exchange to include not merely the passing from hand to hand, but also such transmutations as occur when the reproductive or transforming forces of nature are utilized for the increase of wealth, we shall, I think, comprehend all the things that the general idea of capital properly includes, and shut out all it does not. Under this definition, it seems to me, for instance, will fall all such tools as are really capital. For it is as to whether its services or uses are to be exchanged or not, which makes a tool an article of capital or merely an article of wealth. Thus, the lathe of a manufacturer used in making things which are to be exchanged is capital, while the lathe, maybe that's pronounced lathe, I don't know, kept by a gentleman for his own amusement is not. Thus, wealth used in the construction of a railroad, a public telegraph line, a stagecoach, a theater, a hotel, etc., may be said to be placed in the course of exchange. The exchange is not effected all at once, but little by little with an indefinite number of people. Yet there is an exchange, and the consumers of the railroad, the telegraph line, the stagecoach, theater, or hotel are not the owners, but the persons who from time to time use them. All right, thank you, like and subscribe. See you tomorrow.